My name is Natalie Crow. I'm 36 years old. I walked into my parents' house on Christmas Eve with a bag full of wrapped presents cutting into my shoulder, a store-bought pecan pie sweating through its plastic lid, and my two kids dragging their feet behind me like they already knew this wasn't going to go well. Ava clutched her backpack like a shield. Logan shuffled along beside her, one mitten hanging off his hand, the other gripping a folded piece of cardstock he'd been working on all morning. The house looked exactly the same as the last time I'd seen it 3 years ago. Same dusty garland from the early 2000s sagging sadly across the doorway. Same cracked nativity set on the little side table, one wise man missing, and the baby Jesus leaning at a strange angle. Same cold air in the hallway, because they still refused to fix the draft, no matter how many winters they complained about it. It was like time gave up trying to move around here. I hadn't been home for Christmas since the fight about my divorce. It was ironic. My parents never liked my ex-husband, but somehow when I left him, I was the one they blamed. Even after I got promoted, bought a house on my own, and paid off every dime of debt without anyone's help, I still wasn't enough. Not stable enough, not respectful enough, not whatever fantasy version of me they'd built in their heads. Still, I showed up this year, hoping for some kind of thaw. You tell yourself people mellow with age, that maybe they've replayed the arguments in their heads and seen their part in them. You tell yourself maybe this year will be different. That's the thing about hope. It's stubborn even when experience has told it to sit down and shut up. Inside, it was already crowded. My dad's siblings were jammed into the living room in their annual uniform. Red sweaters that all looked like they came from the same clearance bin. The smell of ham, overcooked vegetables, and cheap candle wax hit me all at once. My Uncle Greg gave me a short nod from the couch without bothering to stand. My cousin Rachel leaned toward her boyfriend and whispered something that made him smirk, eyes sliding over me like I was a car that had just been rear-ended. My dad, of course, was in the recliner. Always the recliner. He sat there like a bitter king on a sagging throne, one hand wrapped around a beer, TV flickering muted football highlights in the background. He saw me the second I walked in. I know he did. His eyes flicked up, landed on me, then deliberately moved past me, like I was just another draft of cold air in the hallway. I shifted the pie in my arms, adjusted the gift bag, forced myself to smile. "Hey," I started. He didn't let me finish. "Everything was peaceful until you showed up." Just like that. No hello, no Merry Christmas, no hug for the grandkids. Just that sentence tossed into the room like a grenade. Conversations died mid-laugh. It echoed in the silence, sharp and mean and somehow familiar, like he'd been waiting to say it. Logan froze. He had in his hands the card he'd drawn for my dad. Snowmen, stars, crooked little candy canes. He'd been so proud of it. I watched his shoulders fold in on themselves as he slowly lowered it, eyes pinned to the floor like it was his fault the air went heavy. I felt my face go hot. For half a second, my first instinct was the old one. Minimize, joke, slide past it. Tell Logan Grandpa was just kidding. Pretend it didn't hurt. Pretend, like always, that it was easier if I swallowed it alone. Instead, I leaned in and kissed Logan's hair. He smelled like crayons and laundry detergent. "You didn't do anything wrong," I whispered into his scalp. Then I stood up straight and looked my dad in the eye. "Then my money's leaving with me." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The words fell clean and heavy into the room. My mom, somewhere behind me, gasped softly. Rachel stopped chewing her peppermint bark and just stared. My dad blinked like someone had slapped him without moving a hand. "What money?" he said. I set the pie on the nearest surface, reached into my coat pocket, and pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying all week. It was slightly bent at the corners from being opened and checked so many times, from counting and recounting the bills just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. $10,000, I said, for the roof, the furnace, the kitchen you've been complaining about since I was a teenager. I held it up so everyone could see it. Then, before anyone could say anything, I tore it in half. The sound of paper ripping through the quiet was strangely loud. One half fluttered to the floor, then the other. "You were going to give us that?" my mom finally choked out. "I was," I said, "not anymore." Ava was already halfway to the door. She moved fast when she felt the temperature of a room change, and right now she was practically sprinting. Her eyes were shiny, and she was trying so hard not to let the tears fall. Logan still stood frozen, that stupid card limp in his hand like it had betrayed him. "Come on," I said. I took his hand. "We're leaving." No one tried to stop us. No one said, "Wait, let's talk." No one defended me, or the kids, or even tried to smooth it over with a joke. They just watched. You could almost see the calculations behind their eyes. How much drama is this worth? Do we step in? Do we let it play out? We stepped out into the cold air. The porch light hummed faintly above us. The night felt so quiet after that living room it almost hurt. I was halfway down the steps, kids in tow, when I heard the front door swing open behind me. "Natalie, wait!" It was my dad. He never comes outside, not for anyone. I turned around slowly. He was standing there on the porch, suddenly looking smaller than he had in the recliner, pale, like maybe the wind had slapped him harder than I ever could. The laughter and clinking dishes behind him were muffled, the house now just a glowing box full of people pretending they couldn't hear. "I shouldn't have said that," he blurted. "I don't know why I said it. Just please come back in. Don't leave like this." I held his gaze. "You want us to come back in?" I said. "Apologize." He hesitated, his jaw clenched. For a second, I thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd double down, call me dramatic, tell me I was embarrassing him in front of everyone. Then he looked down at Logan, who was half hiding behind my coat. "I'm sorry, buddy," my dad said, voice rough. "I shouldn't have said that. It wasn't about you." Logan nodded once, not trusting his own voice. "And to me," I said. My dad dragged his eyes up to mine. "I'm sorry, Natalie," he said. "All right, I'm sorry." I nodded, then I slapped him. Not hard enough to knock him back. Not wild or hysterical. Just enough that it made a sound. Enough that everyone inside probably heard it. Enough that it marked the moment. His cheek flushed pink under my hand. The look on his face wasn't rage, it was shock. Maybe shame. Maybe the first hint of realizing the power he thought he held over me had cracked. "I needed you to feel it," I said quietly. "Just once." We left in silence. As I buckled Logan into his seat, I heard the front door close behind us. No one came out again. No one yelled for us to wait. My hands were shaking, but my mind felt strangely clear, like a fog had lifted. The next morning, I woke up to 9 missed calls, 5 voicemails, and 2 texts from my mom that were just crying emojis and a photo of the Christmas tree. Logan and Ava were still asleep in my bed, curled under the weighted blanket like they were trying to hide from the rest of the world. I made coffee and ignored everything for a while. By noon, my Uncle Mark showed up at my front door. I hadn't seen him since my grandmother's funeral, but he'd always been the only one on that side of the family who talked to me like I wasn't a screw-up. He stood there in a heavy coat, cheeks pink from the cold, holding a paper bag, like he'd just walked away from a war zone. "They're freaking out," he said as soon as I opened the door. "I bet your dad hasn't shut up since you left. Tried to act like it was no big deal, but everyone saw his face after you slapped him." He went back inside and just sat down, staring at the wall. "Good," I said before I could stop myself. Mark gave a short, humorless laugh. Then he reached into the bag and pulled something out. Logan's card. It was a little bent, a footprint smudged in one corner, but still whole. "Thought you'd want this back," he said. "It was the only thing your dad picked up off the floor after you left." I swallowed, hard. "I don't know what happens next," Mark said, lowering his voice. "But I'll tell you this. Don't forgive him yet. He needed that slap more than anyone I've ever seen. And for what it's worth, half the cousins are texting me like it was the best Christmas they've ever witnessed." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I did neither. I just stood there, holding that crumpled card, feeling something shift inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who looked small, walking away. I should have known that meant the real fallout hadn't even started. By the next morning, the emotional dust from Christmas Eve had settled into something sharper, colder. There was a stillness in the house that didn't feel like peace. It felt like pressure. Ava and Logan were eating cereal at the table while I made coffee, and for a moment, everything almost felt normal. But normal is a fragile thing. It doesn't take much to shatter it. I stepped outside to warm up the car, pajama pants tucked into boots, coat half zipped. The air was biting, the snow glowing faintly under a dull sky. I remember thinking how strangely calm the street looked. Then I saw it. My windshield. Not cracked, not chipped, shattered. Glass glittered across the hood like someone had dusted it with ice. A sickening rush hit me. Fear, anger, disbelief, all tightening at once. My breath fogged in front of me as I stepped closer. The mailbox next to the driveway was dented in, leaning sideways like someone had kicked it in a hurry. And in the snow, boot prints. Large ones, deep enough to show someone had lifted their weight before bringing it down hard. I didn't have to guess who it was. My father had many flaws, but subtlety wasn't one of them. I went inside, grabbed my phone, and pulled up the feed from the small camera mounted under the porch light. I'd installed it in the fall after neighborhood kids kept messing with our pumpkins, never imagining I'd someday capture something like this. And there he was, my dad, my father, a man I once let teach my children how to ride bikes. Creeping up the driveway at 4:12 a.m., glancing around, then swinging something heavy straight into my windshield. The crack bloomed instantly, the glass spider webbing like it was recoiling from him. He stood there for a moment afterward, breathing hard, staring at the damage like he wasn't sure what he'd done, then jogged off into the dark like a teenager running from trouble instead of a grown man breaking his daughter's property. My hands trembled as I watched, not with fear, with clarity. Some lines don't blur, they break. I called the police. 10 minutes later, Officer Garcia pulled up. He stepped out of his car, expression firm and professional, not the warm, half-shy smile he usually gave me whenever we crossed paths at school pickup. "What's going on?" he asked. Without a word, I handed him my phone. He watched the footage, jaw tightening, a muscle flickering near his temple. When the video ended, he looked at me like he was searching for hesitation, some hint that I wanted him to let it slide, smooth it over, call it family drama. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. His tone was careful, respectful, serious. "Absolutely," I said. No tremor, no second guessing, just the truth. Garcia nodded once. "Good. He doesn't get to act like that and walk away from it." The next hours moved strangely fast. Statements, paperwork, the footage uploaded. Garcia assured me it would go through easily. It was blatant, deliberate, recorded, and not his first reported outburst. The last part made something inside me drop, like a small stone into deep water. Someone else had reported him. Of course they had. This wasn't new. It was just the first time he couldn't spin the story before the truth landed. By that night, my dad was in custody. 7 days in jail. Restitution for damages. A sentence light enough to feel merciful, but stern enough to mark a line he could never pretend wasn't there. My phone erupted with calls before the sun even set. But this time, the tone was different. My Aunt Marlene texted me, "You did the right thing." My cousin Leah sent a voice memo. "You finally did what the rest of us were too scared to do." Rachel, of all people, wrote, "I'm sorry. I used to think you were dramatic. I was wrong." For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family screw-up. I was the one who finally did something. But victories in a family like mine never arrive without consequences. The morning my dad got out of jail, I woke up early, before the kids, and stood at the kitchen window with a mug of coffee between my hands. The house felt tense again, like the air was holding its breath. Ava and Logan were still asleep. Their little legs sprawled across my bed like they'd kicked away all nightmares. My phone buzzed with the message from Garcia. "He's out. Let me know if he comes near your place. We have everything documented." I stared at the message. It wasn't reassurance. It was a warning disguised as courtesy. The silence from my family that day wasn't peace. It was planning, positioning, waiting. They were deciding which version of the story they would tell. And the following morning, the knock came. Firm, deliberate, unhurried. I peeked through the blinds. Uncle Pete stood on my porch holding a brown paper bag, shoulders hunched against the cold. Pete wasn't the emotional type. He wasn't the meddling type either. For him to show up unannounced meant something big had shifted. "You busy?" he asked when I opened the door. I shook my head and let him in. He set the bag on the kitchen table but didn't sit. He looked around the room, at the kids' art taped to the fridge, the half-built Lego tower on the floor, the crumb-filled cereal bowls I hadn't had the energy to wash yet. Something softened in his face. "You've built something good here," he said. His voice surprised me, gentle, almost protective. Then he got to the point. "I watched the footage, Natalie. Your dad smashing your windshield like that." He shook his head. It was disgusting. It wasn't anger, it was hatred. And not one person in that house tried to stop him from where that hatred was heading. Still, I said nothing. Pete took a slow breath. "I want you to understand something. We've all known for years he's been out of line. The way he talks to people. The way he talks about you. We just let it slide." He hesitated before adding, "I let it slide, and I shouldn't have." His words hit harder than I expected. He pulled out a chair and finally sat down. "You did the right thing pressing charges. Honestly, It's the only thing that ever would have gotten through to him. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. My silence wasn't empty, it was full, heavy with everything I'd carried alone for years. That night, Garcia stopped by. He said he was in the area, but the folder of restitution documents in his hand was a thin excuse. He rewired my broken porch light, the one I hadn't had time to fix. When he finished, I handed him a soda, and he leaned against the railing, breath clouding in the cold air. Most people, he said softly, spend their whole lives letting family get away with things they'd never accept from a stranger. He glanced toward my front door. You changed that. I didn't answer, but something warm flickered in my chest, something dangerously close to hope. For the first time in a long time, my story didn't feel like something happening to me. It felt like something I was directing. I should have known that wasn't the end. Stories like mine never wrap neatly. They twist. They bite back. And my family was only just getting started. The first few days after my dad got out of jail were unsettlingly quiet. Not peaceful. Peace has weight. It settles into a home, into your bones. This was different. This was the kind of quiet that feels like a storm stalking the edges of a town, waiting for the right moment to strike. Ava sensed it too. She kept asking if we could sleep with the hallway light on. Logan crawled into my bed every night without asking. I let him. On Thursday morning, before I'd even finished my coffee, someone knocked on the door. Not pounding, not frantic, just 3 controlled taps, like someone sending a coded message. When I opened it, there was no one on the porch, only an envelope on the welcome mat. No stamp, no name, just Saturday, 6 p.m. Inside was a folded sheet of paper with one line written in my mother's handwriting. Family dinner, your father wants to speak. No apology, no explanation, just a summons. I stood in the kitchen, holding that note like it was a trap disguised as an invitation, because that's exactly what it felt like. A stage they wanted me back on, a scene they planned to control. I called Aunt Jackie. She answered on the first ring. Are you busy Saturday? I asked. Her tone sharpened instantly. What happened? I read the note aloud. Say no more, she said. I'm coming with you. That alone should have comforted me. But instead it confirmed something I already sensed. Whatever this dinner was, it wasn't reconciliation. It was reputation management, damage control, a performance that needed an audience so they could rewrite what happened. Saturday came fast. I arranged for the kids to stay with Jackie earlier in the afternoon. Ava with her new puzzle, Logan with his Legos and a bowl of popcorn to keep him busy. They didn't ask why they couldn't come. Kids know when something isn't safe. Even if they can't explain it, they feel it. At 5:55, Jackie and I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house looked dimmer than usual, even with the Christmas lights still clinging to the gutters. The inside lights were on, but the glow felt muted, like the bulbs were tired. I stepped inside first. Jackie stayed close behind me with a quiet, unmistakable message. If they try twisting anything, I'm here. The dining room was full. My dad stood at the end of the table wearing an old gray sweater he used to put on when he wanted to look presentable. My mother hovered near the kitchen doorway holding a tray of deviled eggs, like a peace offering no one asked for. My aunts and cousins were already seated, forks paused mid-air, watching with tight, polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. I didn't sit. My dad cleared his throat. The entire room fell silent. He stared at the table before finally looking at me. I just want to say something, he began. His voice wasn't loud or commanding. It was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I was wrong. 3 words, sharp, simple, almost foreign coming from him. He swallowed hard. I scared Logan. I hurt you. I embarrassed this family, and I'm sorry. He looked at me fully then, and there was no sneer, no defensiveness, nothing to hide behind. For a split second, I didn't see the man who smashed my windshield. I saw the man who taught me to ride a bike. The man who used to lift me onto his shoulders in the backyard so I could pretend to touch the sky. But memories aren't enough. They're never enough. Not when the present hurts more than the past can heal. My mother stepped forward next, voice trembling. I've let him treat you this way for too long, she said. I told myself it was easier not to stir things up. I should have stood up for you. I didn't, and I'm sorry too. Their words hung in the air like the faint smell of something sweet, but sweet can still be a warning. Sweet can still be poison. I scanned their faces. Not one person moved. Not one person contradicted them. If anything, they looked relieved, as if they had been waiting for me to crumble into a hug and declare it all forgiven. But I didn't crumble. I forgive you, I said. And it wasn't anger or softness, it was clarity. A clean, sharp line between then and now. Aunt Rachel let out a small breath, like the moment had passed safely, like we were all about to move on. But something inside me whispered not yet. After my parents finished their apologies, the evening unfolded in a strange, fragile rhythm. My mom handed me a small box for the kids. A puzzle for Logan. A scarf Ava might like. The kind of gifts meant to fit smoothly into a narrative of healing. The dinner felt like a scene written by someone who desperately wanted a happy ending, but didn't know how to build one. Every conversation felt rehearsed. Every apology felt slightly too polished. Every smile carried a hint of strain. By the time the meal was over, I felt a quiet pressure building in my chest. Hope mixed with distrust. Relief mixing with dread. Two truths fighting each other in the same breathing space. Part of me wanted the apology to be real. Wanted this to be the moment everything finally shifted. Wanted my parents to be the grandparents my kids deserved. But another part, older, sharper, wiser, knew something was off. This wasn't reconciliation. It was a reset, a pause, a performance with missing lines. And the moment we pulled out of the driveway and the house disappeared behind us, the unease settled deeper, like a scent in a room that didn't belong. I drove in silence, Jackie beside me. At one point, she glanced over. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. It felt real, but it also felt timed. She nodded slowly. "People apologize when they lose control, not when they gain clarity. Just remember that." I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because I already knew she was right. For a few days, things felt almost peaceful. The kids wrote thank you notes. My mother sent a picture of the puzzle Logan had drawn for Grandpa. I didn't respond, but I didn't block her yet either. One last thread still attached. One last hope clinging. But hope is a delicate thing. And mine was about to crack. It was the second week of January when the cracks finally showed. I had just gotten off work and stopped by the grocery store with Logan. The fluorescent lights were harsh, the store half empty, the kind of evening where you expect quiet, mundane, healing quiet. We were standing in the produce section, debating apples versus tangerines, when someone said my name. "Emily?" My whole body reacted before my brain did. I turned, and there she was, Marlene. A distant relative of sorts, the woman who babysat me a few times when I was little, always carrying the faint scent of peppermint and a habit of inserting herself into family matters she wasn't asked to be part of. Today, she stood in front of the oranges with another woman I didn't recognize, smiling like we were old friends who'd just reunited. "I heard about everything," she said, voice thick with faux concern. "What a mess." I gave her a tight smile and nodded, trying to keep Logan focused on the fruit rather than the conversation. I started to push the cart away, but then she said it. "I just hope your father recovers from the whole ordeal. I mean, 7 days for a windshield." She clicked her tongue. "You must be devastated." I stopped, turned back slowly. "I'm sorry," I said. She blinked, confused that I wasn't accepting the script she thought we were performing. "Well, your mother's been saying he's struggling, and that the whole thing got blown out of proportion, that maybe, you misunderstood." There it was, the twist, the rewrite, the part where my parents start bending the truth until it snaps into something they can brand as their side of the story. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean in. I didn't make a scene. I just said calmly, "Did she also mention he came to my house before sunrise and smashed my car like a coward?" Marlene froze. Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to catch words that kept slipping through her fingers. The woman beside her suddenly found the onions very interesting. "No," she whispered. "Thought so," I said, turning the cart away. "Have a good night." Logan squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. The next morning, Aunt Jackie called. She never wastes time on greetings. "I've been hearing things," she said. "Nasty things." My stomach tightened. "What now?" "Your mom's been on the phone with half the family," Jackie said, "telling them you cut them off over nothing, that you're being dramatic, that you're unstable, that you've always had issues." The words hit harder than any slap. Not because they were new, but because they were familiar, old whispers repackaged as fresh ammunition. "And your dad," Jackie continued, "is telling people you turned the kids against him, saying he's the real victim in all this." Something inside me hollowed out, a slow, deep ache where anger usually lived. After everything, after the smashed window, after the arrest, after the apology, they still chose pride over truth. Jackie sighed. "They can't stand that you didn't come crawling back. They're rewriting it so they look like wounded parents. I sank onto the couch, staring at the wall. They're never going to change, are they? I said softly. Not a chance, Jackie replied, but you did. And that was the moment, quiet, heavy, when something in me snapped. Not loud, not explosive, quiet like a final thread giving way. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I didn't explain. I acted, for the first time without hesitation. I blocked their numbers, deleted every email they'd ever sent, boxed up the framed pictures from their house and put them in the garage. Memories can be kept, but not displayed like trophies of people who hurt you. When Logan asked about them, I knelt down, looked him in the eye, and said, "We won't be visiting for a while." He nodded. That was all he needed. A week later, something unexpected happened. At a school fundraiser, I ran into Officer Garcia. He wore a hoodie instead of his uniform, sleeves pushed up, working the bake sale table like he'd been forced into it by the PTA. "How's everything going?" he asked. I surprised myself with the truth. Weirdly peaceful. He smiled, and it wasn't the polite officer smile. It was warm, real. "Good," he said. "You deserve that." Then he added, a little quieter, "If you ever need anything, or someone to talk to who won't tell people you're unstable, I'm around." The comment caught me off guard. Not flirty, not pushy, just kind. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything, but it stayed with me. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine. The air was cold, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel cold inside. I realized something important. I didn't owe anyone forgiveness just because they shared my blood. I didn't owe them access to my life, and I didn't owe them the soft silence they used to hide behind. Let them spin their stories. Let them choke on their own lies. I wouldn't be there to correct them anymore. But fate wasn't done with me yet. On Saturday morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "Heads up, the family is telling everyone you were invited to a dinner tonight and refused to come. They're saying you're still acting unstable." Unstable? There it was again. Their favorite word now. Not upset, not hurt, not angry. Unstable. It's easier to discredit a woman than to admit you abused her boundaries. I called Jackie immediately. "Did they invite you?" she asked. "No." "Exactly," she said. "They're pretending this is part of some forgiveness arc and you're refusing to play along." I stood in the middle of my living room, staring out the window. Ava and Logan were at the table coloring, humming softly. My life, my real life, was right here. And somewhere across town, my parents were rewriting me into a villain so they didn't have to face who they were. I'd spent years letting them build that version of me. Not today. "I'm going," I said. Jackie didn't hesitate. "I'm going with you." At 5:55 p.m., I pulled into their driveway. The house was lit up like nothing had ever gone wrong. Cars lined the curb. Laughter drifted faintly from inside. I walked in without knocking. Conversation died instantly. Forks paused. Eyes widened. I scanned the room. My father sat at the table in an old button-up shirt, pretending to be a man who hadn't smashed a windshield in the dark. My mother held a tray of deviled eggs with hands that trembled just enough to betray her nerves. "So," I said into the silence, "this is the dinner I supposedly refused to attend." Every head turned. No one breathed. I didn't sit. I was done sitting in rooms where I wasn't meant to speak. The moment the words left my mouth, the room seemed to shrink. My father's shoulders stiffened. My mother's lips pressed together like she was physically holding back another lie. A few cousins exchanged glances, the kind people share when the script they were told doesn't match the scene unfolding in front of them. My dad stood slowly, smoothing his shirt like it would somehow iron out the truth. "We assumed you wouldn't come," he said, "given everything." "You assumed," I repeated, "and then you told people I refused." A flush crept up his neck. My mom opened her mouth to speak, but I lifted one hand. "No," I said. "You've both had plenty to say about me when I wasn't in the room. Tonight, you're going to hear me." The air tightened. Even the Christmas tree lights seemed to flicker nervously. I took a step forward, not yelling, not shaking, just steady. "Let's start with the truth. No one invited me. You staged this dinner to make yourselves look like victims. And when I didn't magically show up for a gathering I knew nothing about, you told people I'm unstable." The word hung heavy, a weapon they thought would silence me. My voice didn't waver. "You smashed my car in the dark like a coward. You terrified my children on Christmas. And then you told the family I was overreacting." My father tried to speak. I didn't let him. "You humiliated Logan. You humiliated me. I forgave you. You had a chance to rebuild something. And instead, you went back to the one thing you've always done best, rewriting the story to make me the villain." Jackie stepped inside then, arms folded, blocking the doorway like a guard, making sure no one tried to slither away. Her presence alone made several people straighten in their chairs. "So," she said into the silence, "are you going to deny it?" My mother tried. "We didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I cut in. "You meant it when you told people I overreacted. You meant it when you pretended this dinner was part of reconciliation. You meant it when you told people I abandoned you for no reason." The room was dead quiet. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the background, a low, constant reminder of how suffocating this house had always felt. I looked at each person at the table. "If any of you still believe them, after the footage, after the arrest, after the 7 days in jail, after the apology, fine, believe them. But you don't get access to me or my kids anymore." A murmur rippled through the room. Not disagreement, shock. The kind that comes when truth cracks open something you've been pretending not to see. Then I said the last part, the part no one expected. "Apologize to everyone, right now." My father blinked. "What?" "Apologize," I repeated slowly. "To this room, to the family you lied to, or I walk out and never come back. And if you ever try to twist the story again—" I held up my phone. "I released the footage publicly, not to shame you, to protect myself." My father looked around the room, realizing for the first time that no one was jumping in to save him. No allies, no smirks, no excuses, just silence. Finally, he lowered his head. "I lied," he said quietly. "I exaggerated everything. I made it sound like Emily was the problem. She wasn't." He looked at the floor like the truth weighed more than he expected. I just couldn't admit what I did. My mother's voice cracked. "We're sorry." But it wasn't satisfying. Not like the apology at the Christmas dinner, and not like the slap on the porch. This apology felt like a door being pushed shut. Not gently, not with grace, but because there was no other choice left. I didn't wait for dessert. Didn't wait for hugs. Didn't wait for redemption. I turned and walked out. Jackie followed without hesitation. When we got into my car, she looked over at me, her eyes softening. "You handled that better than I ever could have." I shook my head. "I didn't do it for them. I started the engine. I did it for me." That night, after I got home, my phone buzzed. A text from Garcia. "Hope today wasn't too awful. Still up for that coffee sometime?" I stared at the message, the warmth behind it, the gentleness. Then I typed back, "Yeah, I think I am." Right before bed, another message popped up. This one from Rachel, a screenshot of a group chat. My father had written, "I was wrong, and Emily was right to walk away." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some truths aren't meant to be conversations. They're meant to be endings. 2 weeks passed. No calls from my father. No tearful voicemails from my mother. No more fake invitations. Just a hollow quiet where their voices used to be. It didn't fool me. Their silence was never a sign of healing. It was camouflage, a mask they'd learned to wear when confronted. Then it slipped. On a rainy Tuesday, I was picking up Ava from school when one of the PTA moms, Janelle, flagged me down. She smiled politely, too politely. "Your mom came into the library yesterday," she said. "She mentioned she was heartbroken you're still upset. Said you left them without help for the renovation after stringing them along." I blinked, a slow, painful realization tightening in my chest. "What?" I said. Her smile faltered. She backpedaled with a flustered laugh. "Oh, I'm sure she didn't mean it like that." I walked away mid-sentence. I didn't need to hear the rest. When I got home, I opened Facebook, a place I barely used, but my mother used it daily. And there it was, buried among prayer chain comments and reposted Bible verses. Some people forget what it means to be a daughter, but God sees everything. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that didn't even feel like mine. I screenshotted it, didn't comment, didn't call. Instead, I did the only thing that finally severed the last thread between us. I sat down at the dining table while the kids did homework, and I wrote a letter. A clean break. No yelling, no bargaining, no room for misinterpretation. "Dear Mom and Dad, there won't be a next time. No more dinners, no more apologies followed by betrayal, no more whisper campaigns, no more rewriting the truth. You lost access to me and my children the moment you chose your pride over our trust. Do not reach out again." I printed it, signed it, drove to their house, dropped it in their mailbox without parking. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I simply ended it. A few days later, Jackie showed up with a large envelope. Inside were screenshots from a private family group chat I wasn't in, pages of my parents painting me as selfish, cruel, unstable. The same word, again and again. And that was the final snap. The moment something inside me broke so quietly it almost sounded like nothing. I didn't call them. I didn't confront them. Instead, I called Garcia and told him everything. Asked about slander laws, harassment, boundaries. He said he'd look into it. 2 hours later, he called back. They crossed a line, he said. But you don't have to do anything unless you want to. I didn't. They weren't worth another ounce of my energy. But I did one last thing. I logged onto Facebook, posted a photo of me and the kids on our last trip. Sunny, warm, happy. Caption: sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop explaining yourself and just live well. Then I blocked every single relative who had ever sided with them. Closed the app. Closed the chapter. A week later, I had coffee with Garcia. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into something gentle, slow, steady. The kids liked him, which said more than anything else. I still hear things sometimes. Whispers around town, sideways glances, but when people try to bring them up, I just smile and say, we don't talk anymore. And that's enough, because I finally understood something I should have known years ago. Cutting someone off doesn't always look like slamming a door. Sometimes it's just choosing never to open it again. Not this year, not ever.